Hello everyone, welcome back. So in the previous video, we managed to ingest data from NOAA through an API and into the form of a Pandas data frame. So we did that last. We were able to gather the data, go through the data for multiple days, put it inside a dictionary and use the dictionary to build our data frame. That's what we did at the end. And we left it at that. So if I go to that last command, let's see what that data frame looks like. I got the information, but now let's take a look at the header. Just the first 5 records. We don't need to see the whole thing, just to see what it looks like. And as you can see, on the left-hand side, let me get a pencil here for you. On the left-hand side, you have embolded numbers. That 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, that is your index. That is the index of the data frame. This is just a standard data frame with index of values 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can do things about that index. We can change the index. In fact, there is a dot method, a method with a dot notation that allows us to work with that index. But that's what it is right now. That's the index, all right? And one of the columns that we have here in our data frame is just another column is time. Time is just another column in this particular database. Maybe that's column with the time, maybe it could have been to the right somewhere in here or somewhere in there. It just happens to be the first column. That's just a coincidence. It's how we built it. But when we built it, it didn't have to be on the first column, but the time. What's important here is that time is one of our columns. And it's just another column, just like wind direction is a column, just like temperature is a column. Time is just another column, right? So it's just a pretty standard data frame. We want this data frame to be a special data frame now that is called a time series, right? So the time series has special qualities because each row in your data is somehow associated with the previous row or the following row because each row is time stamped. And so the time between row and row, there is a connection in there, right? There is a natural connection. So what happened this hour and the next hour in terms of weather, maybe the weather will change a little bit in 1 hour, but not as much as the weather may change if it's over 1 week, right? What happens today and a week from today, the weather may be radically different. We may get a storm. But from 1 hour to the next, yeah, maybe it'll start raining, maybe the wind will blow a little bit more, but not radically changing, right? It depends where you live. You will say, oh, wait a minute, where I live, the weather can change by the hour. True, but when you compare days or say 1 week apart, the weather can be definitely very, very, very different. So what I'm trying to tell you is when you have a time-associated data frame, a time series that we're going to see, there is something special about it. So Pandas allows us to create a data frame that is a time series type of data frame. And what it is we're going to replace the index, which right now is number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, with that timestamp. And the timestamp will become our index. So to do that, even before we start, we need to do something about that time column. The time column, which is referenced right here in my data frame. And by the way, the data frame, there's something that maybe I didn't mention in my previous videos, and let's not think about it as being obvious. The data frame has a name, it's a data frame, and inside the data frame, we have columns Well, we actually can identify each column by its name. So the time column can be identified in this way by putting within quotation marks the name of the column. So let's see what happens if I run it. Then you can see everything that is inside that column. If I go to the next one, if I say df, let's take a look at another column. Which one do you want to look at? Let's take a look at temperature. So I put within quotation marks the name of my column, which happens to be temperature in lowercase. It could have been something else, right? But it's like that, temperature in lowercase. So I can see everything about the temperature. So each data column in a data frame can be identified. You can pull it. You can also find out the type of the data frame column. Well, in fact, we know the type. Let's not do this. Let's not do this. Let's go back. Let's go back and make it simple on ourselves. We know the type. If I scroll back, the time column is object. And remember I said what in this context, object means string. The temperature is float, which is a number. As you can see, it is a number like 5.6, like 5.0. It's a number with decimals. The visibility, on the other hand, is int. So if I look at visibility, it's right here, 16090, 16090. Those numbers don't seem to change too much on an hourly basis. The visibility doesn't change that much unless it gets really cloudy and humid or something that blocks our visibility all of a sudden and we have fog. But for the most part, you don't get those radical changes. So you see the visibility is pretty consistent. The temperature did change a little bit on an hourly basis. Here it was dropping. Anyway, but you see the object types, the data types of each of my columns. So time says is object, which means it's a string. Right? It's a string. Well, if I'm going to make a data frame that is time series, the first thing I want to do is I want to make that time column to be of a date time type of object. And I do that with this method. It's called the toDateTime method, which means I'm going to convert my time column to datetime. And by the way, I just show you another notation that I just have to open a parenthesis here and show you something else. That notation, a dot notation in the data frame can also be used for its column. So df.temperature will do the same thing for me that df square brackets temperature did for me. That's something we learn over time, and it's almost like an option when you work with data frames when you want to look at a column. But there are special circumstances why we have the data frame with quotation marks here and the data frame with a dot notation here. So these two commands in Python, this one for a data frame and this one, are equivalent. They are the same. They're equivalent. All right, so let's go back to what I was doing. And I mentioned that because you see that right here. So df time, my column time, I'm going to convert it to date time. What am I converting to date time? My column time. So it's almost like changing the column time and putting it back into the column named time. So let's do that. All right, and now let's take a look at info that I showed you before. Now there is a difference here from the last time, right? Now my object time right here in the beginning, oops, I moved my hand. Let's try that again. This time right here is of type date time. Date time. After we ran that command. What did we have before? It said object, just like zip code. Zip code says object. You see zip code right there? It says object. Now, time is no longer object. It was object before, just like description. It says object, and object means string, right? Object means string. But now, not for date time. For date time, it's no longer object. sorry, for my column name time is no longer object as it was before. Now it's datetime. So that's very important for me, because then I will be able to do the next step that you're going to see me doing, which is I'm going to make this time column become my index. And that index is of the type datetime. And when I do that, I'm going to be forcing or making my data frame to become a time series. And the time series is very important, as you will see. Okay, so let's do that. Let's make my index to be time. So my column time becomes my index. That's what this command is doing. Notice that I also have another argument here. It says emplace true. There is a little trick. It's going to take some time when you're doing programming to remember, because I remember when I was learning Python, I kept on forgetting this emplace true. It's a little thing about Python, right? And maybe other languages have the same, which means that I'm not just displaying the index below when I run this, or I'm not just running this command as a one-time, but I'm running it, and when it runs, it's going to modify my data frame. So when I say in place true, it actually modifies my data frame, because I may be trying something, but I don't want to modify my data frame, so it would be in place false. It's one of those things that you will learn over time, and I'm just highlighting for you as we are learning Python, right? So basically what I did is I set my index. So what happens now? Two things. Now let's look at the head, the first 5 rows. So notice now I don't have any more that 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3 name in my index. Instead, in my index, the index actually has a different name because I called it time. My index is named time. And instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., it has timestamps, timestamp, 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 timestamp. So that's the magic of it. From now on, I will be able to do some magical tricks with my data frame, which we are going to learn over time, all right? Over time, not all at once. So the first thing that I'm going to do with it is I'm going to do some plots. Because I have a data frame, I can just run the plot method on my data frame, and I have to tell my data frame here. I'm going to do something to my data frame. To what in my data frame? To the temperature column. Remember the dot notation that I described above? D.time. I described that. D.temperature. That's my temperature. That's what I'm doing right now, in fact. df.temperature. I'm going back here. I'm doing the same thing here. df.temperature, which means the temperature column in my df data frame. I'm going to apply a method. How do I know this is a method? Because I see those parentheses. And the method is plot. So let's go ahead and do it. So it runs and it plots my temperature for the last 14 days, right? And it's on an hour by an hour basis, but that's the plot of my temperature. It's a very straightforward plot. There are other things, and we're doing that in class, and we're going to do other videos where we're going to do plots that are a little bit more fancy. But this one is a quick plot that I can do immediately with my time series, which is very nice. As you can see at the bottom of my plot, rather the horizontal axis is time, and it's stamped with the time. There are some timestamps, and then the value over here. So it did that for me very quickly and very nicely, and it's one of the advantages of having this in a certain format. Then I do wind speed, and with wind speed we can see what the wind speed is now. Wow, there was a day where there was no wind. It went down to 0 a couple of times. But for the most part, it's pretty windy. I mean, it was for Chicago. Remember, I did zip code 60610, which is about somewhere downtown Chicago, and it is what they call the windy city. And there are various theories why they call Chicago the windy city, and some of it had to do with politicians. But anyway, let's use the other theory that says because it's windy. and you can see the wind somewhere in this area where it's about 20 miles per hour, which is pretty bad. I mean, a consistently basis. I'd rather see being somewhere between 5 and 10. How about the humidity? Let's look at the humidity. Well, it's been raining. It's been a little bad, the weather, and I think that was the reason why the humidity is in the upper, in the 80 percentage type of humidity. So that's it. That's what I wanted to show you, all of this, to get you to the point where you get an appreciation of, first, going back, we created a data frame from before. Now we had one of the columns was a time stamp in one of the columns. The name of the column was time, but it could have been called something else. It could have been called my time, or whatever name you want to give it. It just so happens to have time inside, but it was only strings, just words, just text. Well, we have to convert that to let the computer know that it's actual time. So we did that by doing the toDateTime method. We created that, and then the second part, we made it into an index, the index of my data frame. In fact, one last thing then we plotted it. Then one last thing, let's do this. Let's do one more time. df info, because that's going to be interesting. And you can see that in the info, we don't have time in the columns anymore. It's not. Time is no longer a column per se. It's an index, right? And it says it right here inside in the description of the information, right here. It says date time index. So it is a time series. And then it goes on to say what is the span of my index, which additional information. But what is important here to note is that it says date time index. And that tells me that it is a time series that I'm dealing with, which has some special qualities. And you're going to be learning more about that again over time as you do more programming. So in this video, I hope it was helpful, that it exposed you to the time series. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal to advance your knowledge into the time series world. All right? Then I'll talk to you later. Before I go, I'll let you know, remember, all of my videos, let me save it, they are stored in GitHub, and I have the GitHub. If you go to my channel, you see a link to my GitHub so that you can get a hold of this code and you can try it on your own. You can download it and you can try it on Jupyter, or you can copy and paste this code and put it on Spider or whichever your favorite Python tool may be. Okay, so you can do this on Python or Spider. So you're welcome to do that. And that's great. So this is my last video on the Pandas for now. All right, so I want to work with you on plotting. So we'll work on plotting on the next few videos. But there is so much more that we can learn. Hopefully, in the way that I cover this material, will also allow you to, on your own, explore and find out about other libraries. Because once you learn one library, you will be able to know what to look for when you look for in other libraries. All right, then I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.